Hi, folks. My name is Rob. I'm a partner at Mayfield Fund. Mayfield is a classic early-stage venture capital firm. The firm was actually started in 1969, which is probably older than a lot of folks in the room. I'll give you a little bit of my background, and then what I thought we'd talk about is I was going to give sort of a quick little primer on sort of venture capital and what it's like to raise money, and then Mitchell and Paul can share their specific experiences in raising money. Mayfield is an investor in both of their companies. My personal background is I was an entrepreneur and an engineer, started a couple of software companies. It's been a long time since I wrote code, but part of the reason that I'm here is that I really believe that Go is an important new language, and in particular I think that it's a key language that facilitates the coming wave of companies that are going to be built around distributed systems. And so that's why I'm here and interested to meet people that are involved in startups using Go. Personally, I feel that it's a really, we're at the very beginning stages of another platform shift, and I think Go plays a key part of that platform shift. So a little primer on Mayfield. We are currently investing our 14th fund. We raise a fund every 3 to 4 years. A typical fund for us is about $350 million. In a typical fund, we make about 30 investments. Those investments, we typically invest in Series A stage companies. That does mean that sometimes we help start companies from scratch. We're not averse to doing that. It's hard to do that, and in terms of the key aspects that we think about in that regard is it's typically people that we've known and worked with before. So it might be a previous entrepreneur that we backed who then decides, hey, I've got some general ideas, help me figure out what direction to take them. A typical investment for us would be somewhere between $2 and $8 million initially. We're typically owning somewhere between 20 and 40% of a company initially, and then we will reserve additional capital so that if you did the math, $350 million divided by about 30 companies is about $12 million per company. So we put some initial capital in, and then we reserve capital for that company to sort of support it over the life and growth of the company. The firm is 5 partners. We have no principals, no associates, no analysts. All of us are ex-engineers and ex-entrepreneurs. And a lot of firms use sort of have bigger organizations, much more sort of a hierarchical model. And when I joined Mayfield about 16 years ago, we had a much bigger organization. And one of the things that it created was sort of a siloed approach to things. With only 5 partners, all of us, we have a fair amount of overlap in terms of the types of things we do. So a lot of us do infrastructure software, a lot of us do SaaS or mobile application software. There are particular areas of expertise that people have. So I'm more of an applications software and an infrastructure software guy, but some of my partners have deeper, double E's, deeper expertise in storage and networking. We also invest in consumer technology. So let's talk a little bit about sort of venture capital. We typically see about 1,500 deals a year. So there's 5 of us. Processing 1,500 deals is complicated. And really what it means is we have to have a pretty tight filter as to what are the types of things that we will end up investing in. We only invest in 5 to 10 companies a year. Unfortunately, that means that 99% of the companies we end up saying no to. But we are a service business, and so we always want to try to be helpful in those interactions. Every Monday we meet, the 5 partners sit around, we talk about what are the companies we've seen, and we prioritize on any given week. We prioritize only maybe 1, 2, or 3 companies to really dig in and see whether there's an interesting opportunity. Let me now transition, and what I'd like to do is sort of talk about how we met these guys, and then flip it around and let them talk about it from their side. I know in some cases I know exactly who they were talking to as other prospective investors, and in other cases I don't. And I think one of the things that would be interesting is to hear from them what it was like from their side in terms of how they ran the process, and hopefully a little bit of writing about it. I'll start with Mitchell. Mitchell and I met hopefully a year and a half before he actually started the company. And I heard about Baker, and I heard this groundswell
environments to the replicate environments. And it became clear that Vagrant was sort of a better version of it. I met with Mitchell, and one of the things that I was incredibly impressed by him and the talent that he demonstrated personally. But there was a vision that he alluded to, and I'm still getting to know him, and I'm still, at times, I ask questions about future ideas, and one of the comments he made to me recently was, have you been reading our lab notebooks? Because some of the ideas are like what we've been thinking. I was not sure that Vagrant by itself was a company. And this, I think, is an important piece of the discussion today. There are features, there are products, and then there are companies. And sometimes people come up with really interesting features, really interesting libraries that have very important purpose, but very hard to necessarily build a business around. Then there's other times that companies, and I think Vagrant is a great and important technology, but it wasn't clear how Vagrant was going to be the engine from a revenue perspective to build a business. And one of the early conversations was, well, maybe if we attach ourselves to VMware, where obviously there is a big install base and a big revenue base, maybe there's an opportunity for Vagrant and a VMware connector or integration with Vagrant could drive some. But then the arc of the story, I think, changes as Mitchell and Armand and team sort of built out a broader suite of technologies. I alluded to it before. I've lived through personally having built software companies that went through the PC to mini computer, or mini computer to PC, and then PC to client server, and then client server to web based. I think that what we are now in the midst of is a distributed computing base. I don't know the right term to use for it, but this web scale microservices wave that we are in, yes, it's a bit of refactoring technologies that built before around messaging infrastructure and SOA and services. But I think that, again, Go is an important piece of the puzzle here. Building distributed systems is hard, and that's why a lot of people are here. I tried to build systems around semaphores and these X's, and I mean, it literally makes my brain hurt still thinking about that. Go, I think, and the platform shift that we're in the midst of, I do fundamentally think that we are going to see all levels of the stack, from operating system, databases are obviously clearly in the area of disruption. There hasn't been sort of an app server middleware tier. There's obviously stuff going on around messaging. But when you rebuild this stack, there's a huge opportunity. Rebuilding logging, rebuilding testing, rebuilding tracing, debugging, monitoring instrumentation, security, networking, all of these things need to be rebuilt. And so that theme that led us to start looking at companies like HashiCorp. So what I'd like to do is maybe let Mitchell tell his side of the story in terms of how he started, and maybe you can start with sort of that Vagrant VMware piece and how you saw the transition of what you learned from that phase, and then the transition beyond that.
Sure. When Robin first reached out to me, I was happily employed in another company and not looking to start a business. I took the meetings up the tree. And I think when there was a turning point at some point when Vagrant was taking too much of my time, where I had to decide either to just not dedicate as much time to it or to go all in on it, basically. Because I'm working like an 8+ hour other startup job as an employee during the day, and then working at like 6+ hours at night on Vagrant, basically 6 days a week. And that was starting to affect my life. I started looking into it, and I started HashiCorp around Vagrant, and I also had to make a decision, which is, do I make this a smaller lifestyle-like business, or do I try to aim bigger, and bigger? And of course, when I met with, and this is after I met Robin, when I met with Robin, he in his capacity as venture capitalist, pushed me to do something bigger, but I have a history of making fairly successful lifestyle businesses and selling those off. So I was wondering if I should do that or a bigger thing. And I started with more of the lifestyle thing. I did the VMware integration. A lot of you might know about that. It's still for sale today. quickly exceeded the salary I was making at my last job. I was very comfortable. Armand joined me at that point, and we were profitable. And then we talked about like, well, what do we want to do? And we always had this bigger idea of Vagrant's a really critical development piece, but I did opposite. My last job in Armand was a developer, and everything past the Vagrant point was still really, really painful. And our research, I don't want to go too much detail, but our research in undergraduate was about like the whole process. So we were pretty aware of the pieces we wanted to exist, not necessarily built. And then at some point we just talked about it and decided that we're profitable, we can afford to spend a lot of time in R&D, we have a very strong community in Vagrant, we have a good channel to release new software. Let's go for it. Like, let's build the whole piece, and then, knowing this is like a many-year process. Like, you don't simply build all these like fundamental pieces of getting to development production in a year or something. That's what we started along, and then at some point, when we got there, we reached out again. Well, Robin was always pretty happy about what we're up to, but then talked to Robin again, and decided to go the venture capital route because this idea just couldn't exist at a very small scale. Like the people we're talking to are much bigger. There's a lot of community adoption, but bigger companies won't adopt things if you're small and things like that. So we had to talk to VC, and we're very happy, I guess, to get that growth going.
So I think one of the things that I think is important. There are great businesses that are lifestyle businesses. There are great opportunities to start companies that can then be acquired. Unfortunately, investing in a fund, we're trying to look for situations that can literally be multi-$100 million revenue businesses and ultimately multi-$100 million, multi-billion dollar companies. I would not have invested in Vagrant. I had hoped for what they would turn into, but in that VMware Vagrant phase of things, I didn't invest. And I think it was really partially that I wasn't ready, but also I think they were having this philosophical question of, do we want to take on a professional investor? Do we want to, where our expectations are that, that HashiCorp becomes $1 billion plus company someday. There's constraints associated with that. I think that's an important lesson to take away is that if you put yourself on that path, the expectations get much larger, whereas if you decide you want to run it, you want to control it, selling it for $1 million or $5 million or $20 million or something, can be dramatically impactful from a life perspective. But again, that's not the nature of our business.
I think an interesting point too that an interesting struggle that Armand and I had too is that I think might resonate with people here is that we're both very, very, very technical. Like we're programmers. We still to this day, even in our free time, spend all our free time working on stuff. A lot of you might know the products, like the projects we've been coming out with. They're very technical. They're not surface level things. They're pretty core things. They're distributed systems. They're hard to build. And so from an engineer perspective, there was also a fear of like, what does it mean to take venture capital? What does it mean for our passion of working on these tools? How does our roles change? How does our future change? That sort of thing. And I think what I've learned in that, and it's only been a year-ish since we've taken VC, and it's been almost 3 years in HashiCorp. And what I've learned since taking VC and growing from 3 people to a little over 15 now is that as much fun as I have programming, being sort of more, and I still do a lot of it, but being more of a mentor and helping other build programs, there's so much more getting done than I could do on our own. We now have 6 open source projects and a commercial project, all of which are being used at sort of the top 100 website scale, and 3 people could not have fixed bugs and shipped features and shipped projects fast enough. So it's been kind of fun to see that happen, but I think that's a struggle that folks like you have to deal with.
So I want to give Paul a chance to sort of share his story. Background was that I mentioned sort of the layers of disruption that we were seeing or predicting to happen. Well, the database layer was a key one. personally wrote a lot of stuff on databases. I wrote an ORM layer 20 years ago. I was taught, because of my age, I was taught jam everything into a relational database. Obviously that algorithm has now changed pretty dramatically. About 3 or 4 years ago, I actually asked about 100 CTOs of engineering. What I thought was a set of innocuous questions. One of them was, what database are you using? And the answer that I got back was, we're using 3 or 4 or 5 different databases. It shocked me. And when I drilled down on that, the reason why was that people, well, one, people hate schemas, and I get it, I understand, managing the migrating systems is awful. But people were comfortable because of the cost of storage going down so low, because of the cost of compute being so low. People were comfortable replicating the data across different databases because different parts of the system wanted the data accessed differently. If I'm going to do search in one part of the system, or I'm going to do, I want lightning fast evaluate one construct, I want time series, kind of trending analysis with sliding windows, I want polymer, kind of full lab kind of aggregation. Those are all very different database use cases. And so we watched this fragmentation occur in the database industry. We happen to be an investor in both NAPR, which is in the Hadoop ecosystem, as well as Couchbase in the NoSQL category. And that led us to see that there was an unmet need, or we hope an unmet big need around metrics data, time series, event data. And we asked around, we said, what are people using? The answers that we got back were, oh, we're having trouble using OpenCSV on top of HBase. We're having trouble using Kairos on top of Cassandra. Those are complicated systems to set up and configure. And oh, by the way, there's this interesting new thing called Little. And so literally I cold emailed Paul and said, hey, I'm interested in Influx, I'm interested in events and time series data. Let's strike up a conversation. And so turn over Paul to give this side.
Yeah, and so our origin story is very, very different than the HashiCorp one, because Todd and I started the company initially as a SaaS product to do metrics and real-time monitoring of those metrics. It was kind of in the server monitoring / APM space. We did that in 2012, and we got a basic product out, and we decided to do Y Combinator because we wanted to like accelerate things from the very beginning. Like we were working as consultants, and we were doing pretty well there. Like, okay, we do this, it'll allow us to really like kick things into high gear. So we did YC in the winter of 13, and then out of that raised a seed round funding, a fairly small seed round for a YC company, and then just kept working on the SaaS product for the next 6 months after that. And over time, what we found was that the space we were trying to compete in was super crowded, and we didn't really have a way to differentiate ourselves, which was probably why we had trouble raising our seed round to begin with. But what we did find was with a few people that were paying us money, they were essentially using our API like a time series database. And I started talking to other people that were also building server monitoring companies and people in larger companies that were trying to roll their own stack. And I saw that everybody was like repeating the same effort. And for the API of Airplane, which was the SaaS company, it was the second or third time I had actually created like a time series database. So I knew exactly like how much effort went into that. Like even though Cassandra, like primary use case for Cassandra's time series, it still takes multiple developers many months of effort to get it to work, and even then it's hard to maintain and use. So in the fall of 2013, we decided, okay, well let's see if there's interest in doing this as an open source project. Forget the SaaS thing. We'll just focus on the infrastructure. And the idea we had was, if it's infrastructure, essentially in this day and age, infrastructure has to be open source. Developers wanted to build their tools and their careers on open source products and open source infrastructure. So we're just like, okay, let's take like, this would be version 4 of the Airplane API, spike on it as a pure open source project, which meant we had to build it in a different way than you would build a SaaS app, right? Because a SaaS app, you hide a lot of complexity behind your user interface and your API. But as something that's meant to be deployed by somebody else on their own hardware, you have to make it simple. And that was one of the things we focused on from the very early stage was ease of installation and ease of use. So at the time, it was just 3 of us, and we built the initial prototype of Influx, and then I started giving talks, and people started really like picking up on it. And people were really excited about what we were doing. And obviously, it was super early then, but people were excited about the idea of what we were building, and we had a lot of people telling us they were interested in using it. So around April of 2014, I was thinking about, okay, at this point, we're thinking, okay, either we still focus on the open source thing and we kind of like pivot the business into consulting / open source, because that's what we'd have to do to actually like remain profitable and keep the thing going. And Todd and I have a pretty extensive background in consulting, so we were comfortable with that. But we knew that if we started consulting, it would kill the momentum on the open source development. So at the time, I was thinking about raising a seed round of funding, like additional seed funding. And Robin reached out, and we had a conversation, on the phone, because at the time I was based in New York and Robin's in the Valley, and we had a good conversation there. And I started talking to some other people, and then the next time I was out in San Francisco, I dropped by the Mayfield office, and instead of doing like a pitch where you have like a deck and all this other stuff, Robin and I just met in a conference room, and essentially we just whiteboarded for like 2.5 hours. And I thought the meeting was going to be an hour. I actually had, I don't know if I told you this, I had a meeting scheduled with another VC, which I ended up missing because of that conversation. So basically, I had to like call him right after I got out. And,
That was Robin's plan.
and that is really exactly what I was like.
Swarm in so that they can't, so that other folks can't spend time, which we do as well.
So, but the thing is, like, at the time, the only thing we had, obviously, was InfluxDB, and it was very much a prototype. But we whiteboarded ideas for what the company could become, like what different things we could build out, and what problems we could solve for developers in this space of time series data, metrics, and stuff. And I came out of that meeting really impressed. And I was basically like, okay, I think I want to do the VC thing. If we do, Robin's the guy I want involved. So we just kept talking over the course of the next 4 months. And over that time, usage of InfluxDB just kept picking up, and people started giving talks. And also during that time, like if there was anything public that people were saying about Influx, I would just point Robin to it. I'd be like, here, look at this. Which I hope was helpful in bringing you over to our side. So, yeah, basically, over that time, we, at the very beginning, I was still very much trying to raise like additional seed funding, and then I think finally it was at the partnership meeting where I did the pitch to the full Mayfield partnership. Robin said, this was like, if you can wave your magic wand and you get exactly what you want, what would you want? And I just said, like, off the top of my head, I was like, a big Series A round so we can actually pursue this thing and put a lot of talent and effort behind it. And then we move forward from there.
Yeah, I think external validation is really important to us. It's great for us to believe that we think that there's a market opportunity. Again, all myself and all my partners are exponential entrepreneurs. So sometimes we have an idea.
That can be dangerous, by the way. But in both cases, we got such glowing feedback on not just the technology, but the people. And I think one of the things, so I've actually been invested in open source for decades. So, in addition to, I mentioned Mapper, Couchbase, another company called Alfresco, called SwiftStack, which is an object storage area. So we're believers, we've been believers for about 10 years that open source would be the means by which the infrastructure software world would be constructed. Back when I started looking at open source, SourceForge was the place that was since been sort of dead and buried. GitHub is a really good place, and not just as a repo, but as a seeing the activity, literally in public, sort of seeing what's going on in terms of changes. But I do think sort of stars are an interesting means of understanding sort of how things rank. If you get 1,000 stars, does that mean you can get funded? Maybe. But it's
actually, it's probably been equivalent to some of my friends who give me hell when they say I raised on stars. Well, it's because of an early talk I did where I equated Mongo stars to about $250,000 in valuation per star.
I think it's a sign and a means that we use to company or open source project, it starts as a movement, it starts as an idea. There's usually no revenue, when these companies
first get going. And so, what can we use as a proxy to say whether something has an interesting potential or not? Stars is one thing. Then the other thing that we do a lot of is, we introduce these guys. In some cases, we introduce these guys directly. In other cases, we just told people, hey, download some of their stuff. Tell us what you think. Again, the answers we got back was just glowing praise about, how easy this stuff is to use, how performant it is, documentation and all that stuff. Clearly those things now are on. So I think one of the pieces that I think is worth sort of going through a little bit of the detail here is that when Mitchell and Armand came to us, they had more. They had more projects at that point when we finally made the investment. So that was the company that we were, so they raised $10 million. And we were comfortable doing that investment largely by ourselves. So we're the lead investor in the company. I had a longer experience with Mitchell. I sort of watched him. I watched the arc of the company. I got a chance to meet Armand, and I didn't have all the answers, but I had enough of the answers as to what were the next things that they were doing to see sort of the trajectory. And so again, we led a $10 million round. Whereas with Paul and Influx, they were still airplane. They were morphing, pivoting into Influx. They were really a time series database, and personally, I don't see the opportunity as yet another NoSQL database. I think their tech stack and the metrics platform is an interesting opportunity, but that hadn't yet evolved. And Paul was in New York, and a lot of other complexities. And so in their case, I gave them a different bar and a different hurdle. I said, let's find a co-investor together. So I introduced Paul to 6 to 10 firms and sort of helped them on the deck. Made a bunch of intros to people who could give the advisors and feedback as well. But we weren't going to make that investment by ourselves. We said, we're not going to be the Series A by ourselves, a company of that one of 3 guys in New York. We're not in New York. How are we going to help this grow? So in their case, it was find a co-investor where we get syndicated them. We got to relocate to the valley so we can help them. And that work took months. Whereas in the case of Mitchell and Armand, more like weeks, between, okay, we're going to raise money to, again, we try to sort of swarm and get all over them so that we can take all their time and work on it.
That really threw us off by that.
Again, I think part of it is we were prepared, we were ready to do it. There's companies that sort of we track and it's like, okay, if and when they're going to raise money, we want to be all. But for Paul and Todd, it was a different bar than Deception. Didn't have one as long a history.
They hadn't evolved as much, in terms of at least publicly, the vision of what they were doing. And so that was a long process of 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, in the beginning, we weren't even looking to raise a Series A. It wasn't even a thing we were doing.
And we do seed stage investing. I think sometimes people confuse how much the round is from the stage of the company. We're fine with investments in companies that are at that seed formative stage. We're not comfortable doing that stage of a company, not in the valley, where we don't have a previous background with people by ourselves. That's a lot of risk. Whereas having a co-investor and introduce them to a firm that literally is right next door to us, and one of the partners there has been involved in the rep, and actually involved in the doctor. So it was an interesting mix of other talent and expertise from the investor perspective. So that's very different sort of parts of the story in terms of what they had to go through to get money. And every story is a little bit different. There's no boilerplate to how we raise money. A lot of it comes down to just picking the right product area, having an all-star early team, and then if you're not known or you don't have relationships and connections, then the proof points are really what is the external community sync. So, you know, what's happening on GitHub, or you know, what's happening with customers and partners. Another really important thing on Influx was it was clear that there was changes happening with OpenStack. We had been sort of around OpenStack because we had invested in that company I mentioned, SwiftStack. And there's two projects inside of OpenStack, Monasta and Silander, that are both sort of metrics, data oriented. And you know, when we dug into it, Monasta is running on top of Worker, which is like it's an open source project running on top of a proprietary database that's owned by HP. Why does that make sense?
Yeah, the other controversial thing is Monasta is actually open source developed by developers at HP. So
But the OpenStack community was starting to talk about how this would be a really interesting, hey, maybe you replace, you know, some of the internals of those things with Influx. I also looked at the number of integrations that people had built, you know, already to Influx without Paul Tuck being personally involved. You know, was starting to pile up. So people had written all the connectors to, you know, to Graphite, Partner, Whisper, Stacks, and Collectively, all that stuff. And then it happened, the community had done it on their own because they saw the value of it. Torkel had written Graphite. It was clear that the Graphite Kwana, you know, for the IT monitoring DevOps use case was an important potential opportunity. So there was all these signs that were pointing to, hey, this thing Influx has, it's interesting, now how do we know, you know, now how do we come around?
Yeah, so one thing I think that's, that I can also speak a little bit about, which I don't know that you have all the background on, since you mentioned the fact that we're in New York and you guys are in the Valley, everybody's favorite topic, East Coast, the West Coast, BED Tupac. So when I was out, you know, fundraising, I was actually talking to some New York firms, and you know, I was showing them this stuff. But by and large, they didn't have, like, they were interested, but they didn't have an appetite for how early we were. And the Valley investors, and you specifically, were able to get there because you saw like where we could go with it. So it was an interesting experience from our fundraising, which was, it seemed to me that the Valley investors had a bigger appetite for infrastructure software, for open source, and for potentially things that are a little bit earlier stage.
You know, I should mention, Mitchell's not in Valley, right? He's in LA, and closer. You know, and it's not like it's not like great companies can't develop everything. They really can. You know, both of these guys have distributed teams. Obviously, with tools and technologies, you know, to allow people to work all over the place and advance so dramatically. So we're not afraid of that. The challenge we have is we can't help. You know, our networks are in the Valley, and you know, for us to help hire, to help, you know, all the business development relationships are all there. So, you know, in both cases, you know, it was a conversation about, okay, you guys realize committing to building, you know, the headquarters is going to be in the Bay Area. If you guys aren't putting here, then that's okay. But you know, the center of gravity of this work has to be somewhere, and you know, for us to really be in a position to help as much as possible, that's what we should be. And literally, that's as a church. That was a big thing, you know, particularly with Influx, is that it had to. You guys have to agree that this is what you're going to do. And obviously that's another lifestyle decision. You know, relocating, in some cases it's relocating families and all that. So you know, these are all tough things to decide, and that's why we only think half a dozen or so investments a year out of 15.
So we're gonna, I guess, I think something interesting about us was the types of investors we're looking for. The seed and A stage was very different for us. We never announced, we never told anyone that we raised the seed round, although it's sort of implied if we raised a Series A that maybe existed. But we did at some point while we were profitable, and we specifically were looking for VC that was going to make it easy, like wasn't going to ask us a lot of questions. It was going to make it easy, because what Armand and I were looking for was someone who didn't want board meetings, who didn't want phone calls, who didn't want to talk to us, mostly, because, like I said, we wanted to build these things for years. And so what we were looking for was we're profitable, but we want to make sure that we are safe to work for the next few years, like from a paying rent perspective, like a very low level perspective. So we raised a seed round for the purpose of don't bother us, we're working. And we did that for 1.5 years. And then when we had all these things, it was just around one Terraform really. So we had Vagrant, Packer, Serve, Console, and Terraform done. We had these 5 things, and there was 3 of us, and we were starting to get really, really big users that were starting to ask about our commercialization, which we had already been thinking about too, but it wasn't time yet because we were building these projects. That's when we switched to the A mode, and with the A, we totally switched around. We were looking for a VC that would be very active, that would help us out. And what we were specifically looking for was we're both engineers. We're both CS degrees, and we're engineers. So we were looking for someone who had more of a business expertise that could help us grow the business, like help us to try to avoid mistakes there. And then we're looking for someone that was technical enough that would understand what we're building. Like they understand the vision of what we're building, the impact, and also just like what it does, so that they can talk to people about it. Like so they don't like we don't have an investor that talks to someone else and tells them about our mobile strategy, which we don't have. So it's like that's what we're looking for, and so we talked to a lot of VCs, and we were in A mode, so we were talking to a lot of VCs, and very few they're mostly good people, but very few know tech. And the interesting thing is when we went into the partner meeting with Robin, that was one of those things too. It should have been like an hour or something, but we were there quite a while because after the partner meeting, all partners were just hanging out, and we realized like, oh, this person wrote gossip protocol systems like in the 90s and was talking to us about Circ at a very low level, and that was really interesting. We found out that the old, I don't know his name,
Yoga Jamal wrote TCP/IP.
Yeah, so the person who founded Mayfield, I think, right, wrote TCP/IP, and we're like, well, the interesting thing is what we saw even at a 3-person stage, and I could now extrapolate to the future 15, is that the founders, the people sort of, I hate to say at the top, but the people who started trickle down culture throughout the company. And Armand and I being very technical, our employees who work with us are very technical, very smart, very driven, and so on that same punch then, we're like, well, if the founder of this fund made TCP/IP, he probably got partners who knew what they were doing technically. And that was also supported by us just talking about software-defined networking at a very low level, gossip protocols, but then them also seeing our vision within that 1-hour meeting and connecting it, being like, oh, if you did this software-defined networking thing with your gossip layer, then you could do this. And again, these are ideas that might be dangerous, but it was exciting from an engineering perspective. It's here are people that help founders build high-revenue businesses, but at the same time, just want to hang out and talk about gossip protocols. That was a pretty fun thing, and so that was a big win for us when we were doing that.
Yeah, so for us, it was kind of similar in that sense. For the seed round, we just wanted runway. Todd and I wanted to be able to pay our rent and student loans so that we could write software for a while. And we were certain that as long as we had some runway, we could figure out something. And for both developers, we could write some code that people would potentially want to use. But yeah,
yeah. The seed round, that's kind of funny too. The question is why would someone, or seed round is $500,000, and we got asked, why would someone give you $500,000 if you were we don't want to talk to you, we don't want any board meetings, we want to build the business right now. And it's sort of and they knew us, so it was sort of like a bet. It was well, our people are working on stuff that eventually is going to be too big for this seed round, so we'll let them go because the idea is big. So the idea was bigger than a seed round, and so and a seed round VC is smart enough to see that. So we'll let them go because they'll do that.
Yeah. We had one VC, which is a seed digital VC, who was looking at in our seed round. Everybody else was just angel investors. But yeah, when it came time to raise the next round of funding, we specifically wanted somebody who would be hands-on, who would help us actually build a business out of this thing. The thing I commonly say is we don't want either people who build a popular open source project that completely cleans out fails in 2 years because we failed to turn it into an actual sustainable business.
We like to say we don't want to be sunk.
Yeah, exactly. I do not want to get acquired by there.
We have a couple of mics set up, and people want, happy to take some questions.
One thing I'll say while people are looking up is, both of these guys are really humble, and I think to me that's, we are in the fortunate position that we get to pick who we want to work with. Sometimes we want to work with somebody and they don't want to work with us, but one of the things I've really enjoyed is how grounded these guys are. If you read their commentary in terms of sort of how they think about things and philosophies, I think there was a good meeting of the minds in terms of understanding what the working dynamic would be like. One thing that I'll mention that surprised me that I was incredibly impressed by, I went to a HashiCorp board meeting, and they said, yeah, we got this early customer who's going to run console on a couple hundred machines. Yeah, it might be $1 million order. And all they really want is they just want commercial support for console. And these guys have a whole bunch of projects. I'm sure there's lots of people who want to pay them for support on those individual projects. And before I had a chance to sort of object, the answer that the individual gave was, he said, well, we told them we have one product. It's Atlas. And that may seem like a simple thing, but being an engineer, sort of having the pride of ownership and having built all these cool components that these guys have built, it would have been very easy for them to fall into the trap of, we've got 6 products, or we've got 7 products, different SKUs, how do we price them, how do we package them, how do we support them? And I think it was incredibly insightful from a business perspective that these guys took the line and said, we've got one product, it's Atlas. You pay for Atlas, it's a subscription. If you want to use console, we support it. If you want to use Vault, if you want to use Terraform, you pay for us, you pay one product, and you get support for everything we have. Whether you choose to use everything we have or not is up to you. But there was a discipline that I saw there that really impressed me, and sort of years beyond his experience from a business perspective, that really excited me, at a whole other level, not just at the technical level, but the business instinct that I saw in that one decision was great. Oh, and by the way, an early customer paying $1 million is a pretty amazing feat for a company. So let's start on this one.
Hi. Is this on? My question is, when is the right time to come to the VC? From the stories I heard, it's more like you went to them instead of them come to you. So let's say the typical story is, I have a project, a small project on internet, I have some traction, maybe some stars, and I need more developers to work full-time as opposed to just people working on it in the free time. So what would be the optimal progression to a company to then be able to approach a VC like mine?
Anytime. The reality is, again, there's 1,500 people that we talk to a year to do half a dozen or so investments. So, I get cold emails all the time from people who say, hey, I've got this interesting thing. I'll look at it. So it's fine to send me an email. My email is rhassan@mayfield.com. It's all on the website. I'm happy to do it. I've written a bunch of things about areas that I'm interested in. If somebody comes to me with a project in an area that is not really an area that I'm that interested in or looking at the time, then it's sort of an easy answer to say, sorry, I'm maybe interesting, but it's just not a thing I'm looking at. So I think part of it is to connect what project you're working on with people, investors, that are doing things around what you're doing. Again, I mentioned I have a lot of interest in the Go community because I think that this community is going to spawn some really interesting companies. So that might be enough of a thought. Who else is invested in something related to Go? It might be you're an investor in New Relic, and here's this thing that's sort of adjacent to APM, or obviously there's a lot of enthusiasm and hype around the Docker right now. So I think it's try to figure out what are the themes that specific individuals, and it's not just Mayfield. It's there's 5 partners at Mayfield, and each one of us, we are overlapping in terms of our areas of interest, but if you look at the deals you're personally on the board of, that gives you some insight into the sort of what areas we're hunting in. And if you cold email a random firm or a random partner firm that has nothing related to what you're doing, it's going to be a pretty quick answer. They're going to hopefully they'll email you back. But so I think you have to connect the dots. And again, I think this is where LinkedIn and GitHub and all these things really are important. Is an introduction matters too. Like cold email versus if Mitchell sends me something, or Armand or Paul or Todd send me something, I absolutely look at it with a different level of detail than I would if it just sort of comes out of Go ahead.
I think it's if you're looking at like a seed round, I think the best answer is just when you have a compelling story to tell, like a story that pans out, like not faking something. Like if you're at the point where you have something that's compelling over the next 2 years to tell someone, then I think investors will be interested in a space that's relevant right now. But I think that the various stages, and I've been through seed and A now, but from what I've been learning from other people is just that various stages, they look for different things. They think VCs look for different things. And the seed round is mostly like, you're not expected to have a ton of traction, you're definitely not expected to be making money. Like, it's like, do you have a compelling story that's going to lead somewhere? And the A is more about traction, and maybe some revenue, but not a lot, but that's where we're heading towards. So I think if you're just getting started, it's like, is there something that someone would be interested in? But also, from the founder, from my perspective, it's also going to start putting you on a clock. If you raise $500,000, the VC is going to expect you, they don't give you $500,000 to put in the bank account and never look at. Like, they give you $500,000 to hire people, to accelerate things. And so, hiring people costs money, and then so when the money starts to bleed, it's a very simple Excel spreadsheet that tells you you're going to run out at some point. So you have to be ready for the mindset that in about 1 to 2 years, you're going to have to either talk to VCs again or have figured something out. And that can be stressful if it's something you're just working on for fun. So that's a lifestyle decision like we talked about before.
Yeah, well, the other thing I'll add to that is in terms of I think the thing that's most important regardless of what stage you're raising at is it's kind of about relationship building. So, for instance, you two knew each other for quite a while, and Robin and I had to talk frequently for months before we actually got to something. And for the one firm that was involved in our seed investment, Bloomberg Beta, I actually knew the people who started Beta initially, and I knew them for probably about a year before we actually raised money from them. And we weren't actually looking to raise money from them, but they knew us. And at the time, obviously, the story I told around our seed round was completely different than the story for our A round, because we pivoted and did a completely different thing. So at that point, for Bloomberg Beta, it was more like, we know Paul and Todd, and we think they're smart guys. The story sounds interesting, but we have faith that they're going to figure something interesting out over the course of the seed round.
It's a very common seed thing. So they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Hi. So one of the questions I have is more on the business side. So how do you guys do in order to manage all the investors that you have? And how do you decide what percentages of the company you're giving away without giving full control to those investors?
I didn't get the second part, but I guess for us, we don't have that many investors. We have a few that are very active, and then we have angels that are helpful, but that now that we are at the age, the angels are more helpful very early on, so now they're more on the back burner. But I talk to Robin every few weeks. I talk to probably both of our A round investors every few weeks, and you don't have to manage them. You mostly just have conversations about what's going on with your company and try to use them as advisors. They sit on the boards of so many companies that succeed and fail, but they see things that you just sort of have to appreciate that you haven't seen. And so sometimes a VC will tell you something and you'll shake your head and be like, what are they talking about? And then 3 months later something happens and you're like, oh, maybe the context is missing, but now it totally makes sense. I think it's just, they have to be more friendly.
The standard math that we use is we're hoping to make a couple $100 million out of the investment. So we're looking at kind of our minimum stake is 20%. So it can be worth $500 million, 20% makes $1 million. The earlier, I mean, I've helped start a couple of companies where we own 40% of the company. You know, in Paul's case, because of two investors, each one of us owns 20%. You know, part of it is it's opportunity cost for us. It's not, we don't make lots of investments. We're not a seed stage or a, you know, kind of an angel fund that's putting out investments hoping one becomes a lottery ticket. We don't have a 100% success ratio on a portfolio of 30 investments, but you know, we need a high percentage of those to win, or at least a few of them to win really, really big. So, you know, a lot of it is opportunity cost for us in terms of thinking about where else can we put these dollars sort of for maximum. You know, we're looking for 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 times the money when we're investing in these companies. Well, one example I'll give you again that's not at all related to this audience, but well, as customers, you know, we were the Series A investor in Lyft. At the time, it wasn't Lyft; it was called Zimmer. But super smart guys who had a passion, who had an idea. You know, we're incredibly excited about the potential of that company. But again, for us, it was more about people. But we own 20% of that Series A. You know, as just a whole different capital.
So one thing I can say, like the last part of your question sounded like you're like, how do you decide what percentage to give up? It's kind of about control. So the Mark Zuckerberg case is like that doesn't happen, right? Like even people who are wildly successful entrepreneurs who get their company to IPO, the vast majority of the time you would own a small percentage of the company, right?
And not have special shares that give you sort of unique, like,
right?
You know, blocking rights or all that sort of stuff.
So, and the thing is, like Robin said, for our Series A investment, it was 2 investors. So Todd and I went back and forth on this for a while. Like, we debated this at length because we were like, okay, we're not going to have absolute control of our company, but at the same time, we were comfortable with that because we wanted to find people we could partner with that would help us build it. And again, it goes back to that whole thing about relationship building, which is Todd and I got to the point where we were comfortable with the idea that Robin and Dan, the other guy on the board, would help us actually build this company, right? They wouldn't like sabotage the whole thing, whatever. So we were comfortable ceding some amount of control to move things forward. And it's not like Robin controls the company. It's not like I control the company. Like we as a group make decisions and try to figure out what the best way forward is. But at some point, if you're going to raise VC, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you are not going to have absolute control of your company, unless you're Mark Zuckerberg.
One other thing, you know, these guys have probably given me a lot more credit than I was a couple of years ago. I'm not an operating executive. I was, but my job is not to be there every day at the company helping them make decisions. My job is more, I'm more a coach than a player in this business. So it's to help push them. It's like, okay, you know, you're launching the product, you know, do you have enough SEs, do you have enough sales, inside sales people? You know, have you started thinking, okay, if you're going to hire one, you should probably hire 2 or 3. It's more pushing them on them, put in place, you know, are you using marketing automation? Do you have this, you know, a CRM system? It is more helping them understand what are the processes that they need to have in place to sort of take the first step and then later steps. So, you know, we're not a private equity firm. We're not a controlled investment. We are a venture capital firm where it's find great people who are sort of on interesting missions and help them build and scale. Thank you.
Hi. My question is if you guys are interested also in founding companies that are not in the US, so in the UK. So if you consider these kind of things or should be based in the US.
Alfresco, when it started, I mean, the engineering organization was based in Maidenhead. The whole company was based there. It got to a very interesting size and scale, and the founder CEO came to me and said, you know, I'm probably not the best person to take this company to the next level. And so we've now built an organization. We hired a CEO in the Valley. We built a headquarters in the Valley. But there's nothing magical about Silicon Valley other than just there's a ton of talent there, and there's capital there, and there's, you know, a ecosystem of partners. If you're going to raise money from a Valley firm, they're probably going to want you there. But there's great firms in the UK, there's great firms in Boston.
Every Valley firm I talked to said you'd have to be based in the Valley. Like pretty much every single one.
And it's, look, it's selfish at one level. You know, we don't want to get on airplanes. I'm not going to, I have a horrible story getting here, but, you know, it's about the fact that we have access to talent. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've lived in the Valley for 30 years. And, I know lots of executives. And so it's that talent pool of people that we have access to. So I think the key thing is, one, it's a personal decision. Do I want to uproot my life and my family and so forth? I think the second thing is the expectations. Do I want to take professional investors who expect this thing, or who hope and expect this thing to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars? Or do I want to have more control for along the lines of the other question of flexibility? That hey, I raise $500,000 or $1 million. It's from sort of angels. I raised $250,000 from the first company that I built, and it was all friends and family. So it was my aunt, one of my co-founders' parents, an uncle here. I mean, that was a different level of expectations and stress. It wasn't, are they going to make 10 or 100 times the money? It was, are they going to get their money back? But then when we raised the Series A round, the expectation changed. So you can build a company in the UK. Europe is a huge market, different dynamics, different venture capital community of investors. It's evolved a lot, and they've gotten much more comfortable with early stage because they've started to see great companies, be built in Europe, from an early stage perspective, as opposed to, Europe used to be mostly private equity business more than venture capital. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, my only problem is that for me, as an European, to open a company in the US is not so easy. So for starting basis, I was thinking, if you guys help to just change to the US, if you consider the idea, if this is something you consider, or if the company is based in the UK and it doesn't have a headquarters in the US, you just
corporate headquarters, corporate law and corporate headquarters is a whole different topic. I mean, there's reasons why most companies are, Delaware C corps. It's not an absolute. We wouldn't invest in a Delaware C corp company. Tax reasons why use Delaware. There's reasons why you set up offshore entities for transfer pricing. That gets much more complicated. When companies get much bigger, they're trying to do basically international tax stuff. So, it's not hard to start a company and to incorporate in the U.S. Again, immigration law, that's a whole other topic. But it's fine to start the company wherever.
What are some of the more common mistakes you've seen in companies that you funded and in companies that have approached you for funding? Things that maybe indicate red flags that I wouldn't want to invest in this company versus key indicators of failure.
So you said one of the common mistakes we see in starting and building companies?
Yes.
I think market is a big one. We sometimes, software-defined networking is a great idea. We looked at all those companies. Nicera got a $1 billion plus acquisition. It wasn't clear to us that was a category that we needed to monetize in terms of going into customers and saying, here's what we do, here's what we place. So some of it I think is a category, but then you can get a Nicera that looks like a brilliant acquisition or a brilliant investment because of the acquisition. Whereas a bunch of the other companies in that category sort of struggle because of they really have a concrete product to sell. So I think marketing is one thing. We go wrong sometimes on people. Sometimes we invest in people that we think are stars, but they don't turn out to be such. Or sometimes the trends change. Sometimes they change against you, and sometimes they change for you. I'm involved in a company that I've been on board for 10 years that does identity management software, which for many, many years was an uninteresting backlog. I think common mistakes are really around, from an investor perspective, picking the wrong markets and picking the wrong people. I think company-related mistakes are clearly, I lived through the bubble, so I watch that. I think we are in a dangerous time right now where companies are raising gobs and gobs of capital, and the question is, are they really efficiently using that capital? So, both of these companies, they've raised $8 to $10 million when they're talking about their teams of 10, 15 people. To me, that's sanity, right? There's some companies, that are growing the companies to 50, 100 people well before they've got a demonstrated product market fit or monetizable value. Can I do one more question? One more question.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Tony Constantine. I live in the Valley. I've been computer consultant for 18 years. I have my own company. I have lots of ideas how to build products. The issue is the way I tend to do it is I tend to do it organically. I start with open source product. I build it up. I do a bunch of meetups in my software product. And I start building a commercial product based on my software product. And only then, when I think I've got enough users and enough people pumped up, do I think about approaching a VC and basically to acquire capital so I can attract future developers to the project. Is that something that you recommend, or is that something that obviously you're looking for something that's an idea that's perhaps a little bigger that will grow to a multi-billion-dollar industry?
Sort of beauty's in the eye of the beholder. It's so hard to I wish I could give you sort of a crystal ball as to how we make that decision of which 6 companies out of 1,500 we fund. There's something that captivates us about those few companies that we decide to pursue. It's not science. There's no math behind why we do certain things. A lot of it kind of gets back to one of the other answers I gave, which is, is it an area that we have been studying and exploring? Do we think that there's a compelling market opportunity? Have we heard repeatedly, one of my companies is using Kairos on top of Cassandra. They're super technical, but when I ask them to take a look at Influx, they're like, oh yeah, this is great. So it's that self-referencing feedback that we can get in the due diligence space. So if you're working on a project, again, find the people and the companies that are kind of adjacent to it. Those are the right people to approach. Even if they don't invest, they may sort of help you as an advisor and give you advice and feedback to sort of take it to the next level where you are going to raise capital. But again, not every company should raise venture capital. And again, I think there is something to build lifestyle businesses. Take a little bit of capital. Prove that there's more there, both to yourself and to the investor community. Because if you only raise a little bit of money and it's from sort of a close circle of people, then you have control over what to do next. I think we've well exhausted our time. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time.